Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. My name is Jason Harris. I am 32 years old, and I can tell you the exact moment I realized a relationship I had poured 2 years of my life and it was already over, even though it would take a few more hours for the reality to fully land. It started with one sentence. "Do not start anything tonight," Tanisha said, her voice tight and clipped, the hand on my chest not comforting but restraining. She said it like I was a problem to be managed instead of a man celebrating a promotion. A few minutes later, she pulled her ex aside for a private catch-up, told me to find my own table, and walked away. I did find a table. I found one at home. While she was outside laughing with him, I left the restaurant, drove back to our apartment, packed my belongings, and moved out. When she finally came home 3 hours later, the apartment was nearly empty. I had left a single note on the counter next to my key. Did not start anything. Just finished it. You know that feeling when you slowly begin to understand that you are not the main character in your own relationship, that you are more like a quiet supporting role in someone else's emotionally chaotic movie? For a long time I fought that feeling, minimized it, explained it away. With Tanisha, that feeling had been a low, constant hum for almost 2 years. She had a way of shrinking me without ever raising her voice. My need for basic respect became, in her words, your insecurity. My asking questions became, you being controlling. If I asked who she was texting late at night, she accused me of trying to monitor her. If I wondered why she canceled our plans at the last minute to help some guy friend with a crisis, I was needy and dramatic. I spent 2 years walking on eggshells, trying to mold myself into the easygoing, endlessly patient boyfriend she claimed to want, while quietly feeling like I was failing a test whose rules she kept changing. It did not start out that way. When I met Tanisha at a coworker's birthday party in Dallas, she was charming, warm, and funny. She had an easy smile, this big contagious laugh that made people turn their heads. She seemed interested in my work, in my hobbies, in my ridiculous story about getting lost on a hiking trail in Colorado for 6 hours because I refused to admit I misread the map. At the time, she was working as a receptionist at a dental clinic and taking evening classes. We started talking every day, then going out every weekend, then several times a week. In the beginning, she made me feel wanted. She would send me pictures of the meals she cooked and ask if I want to come over. She would show up at my office with coffee just because. The first time she stayed over at my place, she wandered around touching things, saying, "This place feels calm. I like it here. I feel safe with you, Jason." I did not know then that safe would become another word for easy to take for granted. The first real red flag came around 6 months in, and I saw it clearly only in hindsight. We were at a bar watching a playoff game, and a name popped up on her phone, Victor. She flipped the phone face down quickly, but not before I noticed the name at the top of the screen and the long thread of messages. "Who is Victor?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "Just someone from my past," she said briskly, taking a sip of her drink. When I did not say anything, she sighed. "We used to date. It was a long time ago. He is toxic, but intense. He does not matter now." I remember the way her eyes looked when she said intense. It was the look of someone remembering a fire she was proud to have survived, not someone who was truly done with the person who lit the match. When I asked if she still talked to him often, she rolled her eyes. "Why are you interrogating me, Jason? You are making something out of nothing. You really need to work on that insecurity." I apologized, even though my question had been reasonable. That became a pattern. Over the next year, these small moments stacked up. Late-night messages she would hide, plans canceled for friends who needed her, mood swings that I was expected to absorb without complaint. Once we had tickets to a concert I had been excited about for months. 2 hours before we were supposed to leave, she announced that her friend's car had broken down and she had to go help. When I hesitated, she snapped, "I cannot believe you are upset about something so small when someone I care about is stranded. Do you know how controlling that sounds?" She left, and I ended up going to the concert alone, telling people around me that my girlfriend could not make it. The next day, when I tried to explain how I felt, she insisted I was suffocating her and keeping score. I started to question my own perception. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe this was what mature relationships looked like now, messy and flexible, and always on the edge of some emotional negotiation. Then came the promotion. I had been working toward it for 3 years at my firm. Late nights, extra projects. Can you just take this on too, Jason? Meetings. When my manager finally told me I would be moving into a senior role with a significant raise, I walked out of the office grinning so hard my cheeks hurt. I called Tanisha from the parking lot. Baby, I got it, I said. They promoted me. Her voice lit up on the other end. You did? Jason, that is amazing. We have to celebrate. Let's do something special, not just takeout and a movie. For a moment, I saw the version of us I always wanted. A team, celebrating together. I decided to make it a night she would remember, and I booked a table in a new Italian place downtown in Houston called Lucchia's, the kind of spot you needed a reservation for weeks in advance. I bought a new suit. I picked up a red dress I knew she had been eyeing, but it said was too expensive right now. When I showed it to her, she hugged me and said, "You did not have to do this. I am so proud of you." I wanted to believe every word. The night of the dinner, I felt like my life was finally lining up. I put on the suit, tied my tie carefully in front of the bathroom mirror, and for once liked what I saw. A man who had earned something and who was going to share that joy with the person he loved. Tanisha came out of the bedroom wearing the red dress, and for a second it took the breath out of my chest. "How do I look?" she asked, twirling slowly. "Like the person I've been working all these late nights for," I said, half joking, half serious. She smiled, walked over, fixed my tie, and kissed my cheek. "Let's go celebrate your big night," she said. On the drive there we talked about vacation ideas now that I would have more disposable income. Maybe a trip to New Orleans, maybe a weekend in Chicago. She leaned back in her seat, scrolling on her phone, occasionally showing me pictures of hotels. Everything felt easy. The first 10 minutes at Lucchia's were exactly what I had imagined. The restaurant glowed with warm light, the air filled with the smell of garlic and butter and baked bread. Couples and groups murmured over wine glasses, and a jazz playlist floated in the background. We walked in together, her hand wrapped around my arm, and when I gave the hostess my name for the reservation, I caught our reflection in the entryway mirror, a couple who looked, at least from the outside, secure and happy. Then I heard it. "Tanisha," a voice called from the bar area. I felt her entire body tense beside me, like a wire pulled suddenly tight. She turned sharply, and I followed her gaze. A man was walking out of the bar, tall, with neatly trimmed stubble and a leather jacket hanging open over a gray t-shirt. He moved like someone who assumed the room would part for him. Tanisha's face changed in an instant. Her expression lit up with a brightness I had not seen directed at me in months. "Victor, oh my God," she breathed, stepping away from me like I had vanished. He smiled, a slow, confident smirk that looked rehearsed. "Tanisha," he said, his voice lazy and familiar. "Look at you, still killing it in red." He did not even glance at me. I stood there, hand half extended toward the hostess, feeling like furniture that had been accidentally placed in the wrong room. After a few seconds, I stepped forward, extending my hand toward him in what I hoped was a steady gesture. "I am Jason, her boyfriend," I said. He flicked his eyes toward me for a heartbeat, barely acknowledging the handshake, and did not take my hand. Instead, he looked back at her. "Boyfriend, right?" he said. "Good for you, Tanisha. Safe choice." The words landed like a slap, the kind of insult wrapped in a joke that is meant to humiliate while still giving the speaker room to claim he was just playing. Heat rushed up my neck. I opened my mouth, ready to say something, anything. The basic expectation of decency inside me rebelled. I wanted to say, "That was disrespectful. You will not talk to me like that." I wanted to say, "We are leaving. This is my celebration, not a reunion tour." Instead, before I could get a word out, Tanisha turned toward me sharply. She pressed her hand against my chest, not soft, not gentle, but firm and annoyed. "Jason, stop," she hissed under her breath. "Do not start anything tonight." I stared at her. "Start anything?" I repeated, my voice rising. He just disrespected me to my face. Victor watched us with mild amusement, as if this were entertainment. "He is joking," Tanisha said, shooting me a warning look. "That is just his sense of humor. Do not be so sensitive." Her eyes darted back to Victor, and the priority in that glance was clear. She was worried he would be offended by my reaction. She lowered her voice, leaning closer to me. "I have not seen him in 3 years," she said. I need to clear the air. It is important for my closure. The word closure floated between us like some fragile, holy thing I was not supposed to question. We are at dinner for my promotion, I said. You can get closure with your therapist. Not with him, not tonight. She waved her hand dismissively. It will take 10 minutes, she said. You are making this bigger than it is. She was not asking. She was issuing instructions. Then she turned away from me, angling her whole body toward Victor. Over her shoulder, she tossed the line that ended our relationship, even if neither of us understood that yet. Just go find us a table or something, she said. Order me a glass of Pinot Grigio. I will be there in a few minutes. Do not be strange about this. She reached out and put her hand on Victor's arm like it belonged there, fingers resting on his bicep with easy familiarity. Let us go outside. It is too loud in here, she said to him. He smirked again and allowed himself to be led. They walked toward the patio doors, and I watched them through the glass, framed by the warm light of the dining room, as if they were in a separate scene in which I did not appear. The hostess cleared her throat gently. Sir, your table is ready, she said. Shall I seat you now? I looked from her to the patio doors. Tanisha was already laughing at something Victor had said, her head tipped back, her hand still on his arm. She looked alive in a way I had not seen when she was alone with me in months. She looked like she was exactly where she wanted to be, at least in that moment. And suddenly, a cold, precise clarity cut through the heat of my anger. I realized I was not her partner. I was her placeholder. I was the calm harbor she had tied her emotional boat to while she waited to see if the storm that was Victor would blow back into town. I was the safety net she expected to be there no matter how carelessly she jumped. I turned back to the hostess. No, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. I will not be needing the table. I saw a flicker of confusion cross her face, but she nodded politely. I turned and walked out of the restaurant. I did not slam the door or shout or make a scene. I simply walked out, each step feeling more deliberate than the last. The cool evening air hit my face as I stepped onto the sidewalk. I walked to my car with the methodical calm of someone defusing a bomb, each decision deliberate, each movement measured. Once I sat in the driver's seat, I checked the time on the dashboard clock. It was 7:15 in the evening. I sat there for a minute, my hands on the steering wheel, my mind cycling through what I knew about Tanisha. If she was clearing the air with Victor, and if the way she had touched his arm was any indication, then 10 minutes was a lie. They would go outside. She would order a drink, then another. They would reminisce about their past, about the fiery chemistry she had told me about with equal parts pride and self-pity. She would lose track of time because she did not truly value mine. I estimated I had at least 2 hours, probably 3, before she even thought to look at her phone. I realized, with a strange sense of detachment, that her disregard created a window of opportunity for me that I had never had before. I drove home in silence. No music, no podcasts, no distraction. Just the hum of the engine and the outline of a plan forming steadily in my mind. The city lights slid past on either side of the freeway, and for once I did not feel compelled to replay our earlier argument, to imagine better responses or clever put-downs. Instead, I thought about logistics, what was mine, what I actually cared about, what could be left behind as part of the wreckage of this relationship. When I pulled into the parking lot of our apartment building, I sat there for another moment, staring at the building we had called home for the past year. My chest did not feel heavy. I did not feel devastated. I felt efficient. As soon as I walked through the door, I headed straight for the bedroom. There was no time to get sentimental over furniture or argue with myself about what counted as ours versus mine. I did not want the couch. We had bought it together after visiting 3 different stores, and now it felt tainted, soaked in arguments and forced makeup cuddling. I wanted only what was clearly mine, what directly belonged to me before her, and would belong to me after her. I grabbed a box of heavy-duty black trash bags from under the kitchen sink and headed back to the bedroom. The rip of the plastic as I opened the first bag sounded loud in the quiet apartment. I cleared my side of the closet in 4 minutes. That was not an exaggeration. Suits, dress shirts, casual shirts, jeans. I did not fold anything neatly. I simply pulled them off the hangers and swept them into the bags in armfuls. The sound of hangers clattering against each other and dropping onto the empty floor of the closet was the only noise in the room. It sounded like the echo of something unraveling quickly. Then I moved to the dresser and swept my socks, underwear, and t-shirts into another bag. I did not stop to consider which shirt she liked on me or which sweater we had argued about when I wanted to give it away. Sentimentality was a luxury for people who were treated with respect. I went into the bathroom and opened the top drawer on my side of the vanity. I filled another bag with my razor, my cologne, my prescription medication, my deodorant, my hair trimmer. I left the shared items behind: the toothpaste, the basic hand soap dispenser we both used, the bottle of lotion we shared. I took only the things that were specifically mine, the things that kept me alive and made me feel like myself. From the small cabinet, I grabbed my bottle of vitamins and the extra box of contact lenses with my name on it. Then I went to the entryway and took my shoes, dress shoes for work, running shoes, casual sneakers. All of it went into bags or directly into the trunk of my car. The living room was, strangely, the most satisfying part of the process. I walked over to the entertainment center, crouched down, and unplugged my gaming console. The screen went black. I disconnected my other console, then the external hard drive with my backups. I took my laptop from the coffee table and placed it carefully in its case. Then my eyes landed on the router and modem. The internet account was in my name. I paid the bill every month. Without that service, the smart television, the streaming subscriptions, the voice-controlled speaker, and Tanisha's endless scrolling would all go quiet. I unplugged the modem and the router, wrapped the cords around them, and placed them gently in my backpack. Maybe it was petty. Maybe it was symbolic. She wanted to spend the night closing a chapter with her ex. She could do it using her own mobile data. I opened the small safe in the bedroom closet and removed my passport, my birth certificate, a watch collection I had been building for years, and a thick envelope of emergency cash. Those were non-negotiable. Those were the pieces of my life I would never again leave in a space where someone could tell me to go find a table while they flirted with someone else. I worked quickly, moving from room to room like a blur, sweating under my suit jacket. I did not bother to change clothes. By 8:30 in the evening, my car was packed nearly to the ceiling. The trunk and back seat were full of black bags and boxes. The front passenger seat held my backpack with my documents and electronics, the router and modem peeking out like trophies of reclaimed control. I went back inside for one final walkthrough. Without my things, the apartment looked wrong, tilted, unfinished. My side of the vanity was completely bare, a clean expanse of counter next to the small cluster of Tanisha's makeup brushes and skincare bottles. The closet was a gaping emptiness beside her line of colorful dresses, heels, and carefully folded sweaters. The entertainment center was reduced to a skeleton of loose cables hanging where the consoles used to be, like veins cut from a body. I took the spare key off my ring and placed it on the kitchen counter. For a second, I just stood there, listening to the quiet, feeling the absence almost more than the presence. I looked around for paper and found a piece of junk mail on the counter, some credit card offer we had both ignored. I turned it over to the blank side and picked up a permanent marker from the drawer. At first, anger flooded me with words. I wanted to fill the entire page with a detailed list of every time she had made me feel small, every time she had twisted my perfectly reasonable questions into accusations. I wanted to remind her of the concert she missed, the night she left me on read, the time she called me boring because I did not want to go to a party when I had an early meeting. I wanted to write paragraphs that would finally make her understand. Then I thought about the restaurant, about her hand on my chest, about the way she had said, "Do not start anything tonight," as if my only job was to be quiet and not embarrass her in front of Victor. She wanted me to swallow my words. Fine. I put the marker to the paper and wrote 5 simple words. Did not start anything. Just finished it. I placed the note neatly next to the key, one symbol of access and one symbol of closure, side by side on the cool kitchen counter. I took one last look around the apartment. My chest still did not feel heavy. If anything, I felt lighter, like I just set down a backpack I had forgotten I was carrying. I walked out the front door, locked it from the outside for the final time, and slid the key under the door. Then I walked back to my car, started the engine, and pulled out of the parking lot. At 8:47 in the evening, as I merged onto the highway, my phone screen lit up with an incoming call. Tanisha's name blinked on the display. I did not decline it. I did not answer it. I flipped the small switch on the side of my phone to silent and placed it face up in the cup holder. I watched the screen glow for a few seconds, then go dark. Somewhere across town, she was probably just now walking back into the restaurant, expecting to find me sitting patiently, perhaps a little sulky, but still waiting for her. I imagined the scene in quiet detail as I drove. She would return to the hostess stand, smooth her dress, and look around for me with mild irritation. When she realized I was not standing there, she would assume I had gone to the restroom or stepped outside for air. The hostess would mention, apologetically, that I had said I would not be needing the table. Tanisha's irritation would grow into annoyance. She would text me, possibly something dismissive like, "Where did you go? Stop being dramatic." She would expect me to come back in, to apologize for making her look foolish, to resume my place at her side, as if nothing had happened. She would not yet realize that while she had been outside clearing the air, she had created enough space for me to clear my entire life of her. I did not have a final destination in mind yet. I considered driving straight to my brother Reginald's place in Fort Worth, but I did not want to show up on his doorstep with a car full of bags and an explosive story when he was trying to get his toddlers to sleep. I needed somewhere anonymous, someplace quiet where I could process what I had just done without anyone telling me I was overreacting or asking if I was sure. I exited the highway near a cluster of hotels by the interstate and pulled into the parking lot of a Holiday Inn. The building looked ordinary and clean, a place where traveling salespeople and families on road trips pass through without leaving much behind except a credit card charge and a used key card. That neutrality appealed to me. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of coffee and cleaning supplies. A young man at the front desk looked up and smiled politely. "Good evening, sir. Checking in?" he asked. I nodded. "One night for now," I said. He asked for my identification and a credit card, tapped a few keys, and slid a key card across the counter. "Your room is on the 4th floor. Breakfast is from 6 to 9 in the morning," he said. The normalcy of his tone made the last 2 hours of my life feel almost surreal, like the chaos was contained somewhere far away, in another building entirely. I rode the elevator up to the 4th floor with my backpack, leaving the rest of the bags in the car for the night. I could bring them up in the morning. For now, I just needed a bed and a door that closed. The room was small but neat. White sheets, a generic framed print on the wall, a desk with a notepad and pen, a television bolted to the dresser. I dropped my backpack on the chair and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the blank wall for a moment. Then I ordered a pepperoni pizza from a nearby place, opened a small refrigerator, and took out one of the overpriced beers from the minibar. My phone, still face down, began to vibrate sporadically on the nightstand. Short bursts at first, then longer ones as the calls came in. I did not pick it up. Instead, I watched the way it rattled gently against the wood, like a trapped insect. Eventually, I turned it over and, without taking it off silent, glanced at the screen. The first voicemail came in at around 8:55 in the evening. I did not listen to it right away. I let 3 more messages pile up while I ate my pizza, the cheese cooling in the open box, the beer bottle sweating onto a cardboard coaster. When I finally put the slice down and pressed play on the first message, I already knew, in broad strokes, how the progression would sound. I had spent 2 years listening to her mood swing from irritated to panicked to apologetic whenever I did not respond right away. Now, I was hearing the same cycle from a distance that made it strangely fascinating instead of painful. In the first voicemail, her tone was annoyed and impatient. "Jason, where are you?" Tanisha said. "I'm back at the table. The waiter said you left. Stop being dramatic and come pick me up. This is not funny." She sounded less concerned about me and more irritated that her evening was no longer proceeding according to her script. The second voicemail, about 20 minutes later, sounded more frustrated. "Okay, seriously, pick up the phone," she said. "I'm standing outside now. Victor already left. He had to meet some friends. I'm not paying for a rideshare after you drove us here. This is childish, Jason. Call me back." Her irritation sharpened into blame, painting herself as the reasonable one and me as the unreasonable man having a tantrum. The third voicemail, left almost an hour later, carried a different edge. "Jason, I am home," she said, slightly out of breath. "Why are the lights not working? The smart speaker is not connecting. Jason, where is the television? Where is your computer? Jason, call me right now. You are scaring me." There it was, confusion bleeding into fear. The certainty that I would always be there had cracked. I could hear her footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor in the background, the opening and closing of doors as she moved through the apartment, piecing together the obvious. I had not stepped out for a minute. I had left. The fourth voicemail came only a few minutes after the third. Her voice was raw, strained between sobs. "I found the note," Tanisha choked out. "What do you mean you finished it? You cannot just leave. We live together. You took the router. Are you out of your mind? Please just come home. We can talk about this. I'm sorry I was with Victor so long. Okay? I am sorry. Just come back." I listened to that message while chewing on a now cold slice of pizza. I did not feel pulled to comfort her. I did not feel a surge of guilt or second-guessing. Instead, I felt a detached curiosity, like I was watching a scene in a suspense movie where the character finally realizes that the situation they assumed was stable has already fundamentally changed. After that message, I powered my phone off completely and set it aside. The silence that settled over the room was deep and clean. For the first time in a very long time, I went to sleep without wondering whether I had said the wrong thing, without checking to see if someone was still angry with me, without rehearsing tomorrow's apologetic texts in my head. I slept through the night like a man who had finally walked out of a building that had been quietly filling with smoke. When I woke up the next morning, sunlight was seeping through the edges of the blackout curtains. I lay there for a moment staring at the ceiling, feeling the unfamiliar weightlessness in my chest, and realized it was the feeling of not waiting for someone else's mood to determine the shape of my day. When I turned my phone back on, it vibrated in my hand for nearly a full minute as the backlog of notifications came through. 47 missed calls, 30 text messages, several voicemails. The text followed a predictable arc. Anger, "I cannot believe you would do this." Entitlement, "You owe me an explanation." Bargaining, "If you come home now, we can fix this." And finally, guilt, "I cannot afford this place alone. You promised to take care of me." I did not respond to any of them. Instead, I sent a single email later that day from my work account about logistics, addressed to both Tanisha and our landlord, explaining that I would be vacating the apartment and would pay my portion of the rent through the end of the month. I copied the leasing office on the message. Emotionally, the conversation was over. Practically, there were details to handle. Tanisha did not accept that. When someone like her, someone who leans heavily on external validation and the financial stability of others, loses their footing, they do not usually pause for self-reflection. They recruit allies. 2 days later, my phone rang while I was at my desk eating lunch. The name on the screen was Felicia Grant, her closest friend. Felicia and I had never been close. She treated me like a useful accessory that came with Tanisha, someone who could help them move furniture, someone who would pick them up after a night out, someone expected to be available, but not truly seen. I answered because I wanted to hear how Tanisha was describing the situation. "You are a terrible human being, Jason," Felicia said the moment I picked up, skipping any greeting. Her voice was sharp with righteous outrage. "Hello to you too, Felicia," I said calmly. "She is a wreck," Felicia continued. "She has barely eaten. She is crying all the time. How could you just abandon her like that? Over a 5-minute conversation with an old friend? Do you have any idea how cruel that is?" I took a breath, keeping my tone even. "Felicia, it was not 5 minutes. And it was not just a conversation," I said. "It was a pattern that finally became impossible to ignore." She scoffed. "You are insecure, controlling, and honestly a little scary," she said. "Who clears out an entire apartment in a few hours? That is not normal. Someone who no longer wants to stay where he is not respected," I replied. There was a pause on the other end. "Respected?" she repeated. "She asked you to grab a table and give her a little time to manage a delicate situation. She was trying to handle an old relationship, and you threw a tantrum and ran away." I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the familiar twist of the narrative she was trying to force into place. "She did not ask me to grab a table," I said. "She told me not to start anything, then told me to go sit alone while she drank with a man she used to sleep with, on the night that was supposed to be about my promotion. She prioritized his ego over my dignity. She told me to go away, so I did what she asked. I went away." "She loves you," Felicia insisted. "It was a mistake. People make mistakes." I shook my head, though she could not see me. "It was not a mistake, Felicia. It was a choice," I said. "People reveal their priorities through their choices." There was another pause, this one colder. "So what? "You're just going to leave her there to drown in bills?" she asked. "You know she cannot afford that apartment by herself. You promised to take care of her." I looked out of my office window at the city stretching away in neat lines and small squares. "I already told her in the email," I said. "The rent is paid through the end of the month. She has 28 days to decide whether she wants to downsize, get a roommate, or move. That is more than many people get in these situations." I hesitated, then added, "Maybe she can ask Victor if he wants to move in." Before Felicia could respond, I said evenly, "I hope she finds what she is looking for, but I'm no longer going to be the one providing it," and ended the call. Then I blocked Felicia's number. In the weeks that followed, word filtered back to me through mutual acquaintances and social media before I muted and removed those connections as well. Once I disappeared from Tanisha's life, she tried to pivot back to Victor. She sent him messages, probably expecting that this dramatic break in her relationship meant the universe was clearing the path for them to be together again. According to a friend of a friend I bumped into at the gym, Victor barely responded after that night. He had been passing through town for a few days on business, bored enough to entertain a nostalgic ego boost when he saw an old flame, but not interested in inheriting an avalanche of emotional fallout. When he realized she had just gone through a serious breakup, and that being around her would require actual effort and accountability, he stopped replying. A few days later, he blocked her on social media. She had burned down her castle for a man who did not even bother to offer her a second drink. Then the financial reality hit. At the time, I made significantly more than Tanisha did. I covered about 70% of our shared expenses. Her salary from the dental clinic barely covered her car payment, student loans, and personal spending habits. Without my contribution to the rent, without me paying for groceries, utilities, and internet, the math simply did not work. She tried to stay in the apartment at first, clinging to the lifestyle as if it were proof that she had not really lost anything. I kept my distance. The only messages I exchanged with her were through email about practical matters related to the lease, and even those were brief and factual. Eventually, 3 weeks after I moved out, I received an automated message from the leasing office stating that the full rent had not been paid. A few hours after that email, Tanisha sent me one of her own. There was no subject line, just a single block of text. "I cannot afford this place alone," she wrote. "You promised to take care of me. How can you be so cruel after everything we have been through?" I read it twice, feeling the familiar guilt reflex stir and then quiet. For 2 years, "You promised to take care of me" had been used as a cover for "I do not want to be responsible for my own choices." I did not reply. I had already kept my promise to take care of her as far as was fair. I had ensured she had almost a month of paid rent to figure out her next move. The rest was hers to handle. Eventually, she broke the lease, lost her security deposit, and moved back in with her parents in a small town outside Atlanta. These were the same parents she had often described to me as suffocating and toxic. Now, at 30 years old, she was sleeping in a narrow bed she had outgrown in high school, surrounded by boxes of clothes with nowhere to put them. By contrast, my life became quieter in the best possible way. About 4 months after the night at Lukia's, I had settled into a new rhythm. I found a loft apartment closer to my office in Houston, smaller than the place I had shared with Tanisha, but entirely my own. No shared aesthetic, no debates over throw pillows or wall art. I chose everything in it based on whether it made me feel calm and grounded instead of whether it would look impressive in photos. I spent my evenings cooking simple meals, playing games, and reading without waiting for someone else to decide whether we were having an argument that day. At work, without the constant undercurrent of text message anxiety, I thrived. I volunteered for projects I would previously have hesitated to take on because I was worried about how late nights would impact us. My colleagues noticed that I seemed more focused, more at ease. Some assumed it was because of the promotion alone. I knew better. I did not hear from Tanisha directly during those months, apart from the one email about the rent. Our digital connection dissolved quietly. Her profile picture disappearing from my favorite contacts list, mutual friends unfollowed or muted, our old messages archived and then deleted. Sometimes, on particularly calm evenings, I would think back to our early days together and feel a brief pang of grief for the version of her I thought was real, the version that had brought me coffee unasked and told me she felt safe with me. But the feeling passed quickly when I remembered the version who had told me to sit alone while she chased closure with a man who had already shown her who he was. I did not hate her. I just no longer had any room for her in the life I was building. So when she appeared again, I almost did not recognize her. It was a Tuesday morning around 8, one of those clear mornings where the city felt crisp and awake. I stopped at the coffee shop near my office, a place I had claimed as part of my new routine. I ordered my usual pour-over and stood by the pickup counter scrolling through emails on my phone, already thinking about a presentation I had later that day. I was wearing a tailored coat I had bought for myself as a quiet celebration, paid for with money that was no longer disappearing into someone else's online shopping cart. I heard my name spoken from behind me. Jason. The voice was familiar, but thinner, stripped of the sharpness it used to carry. I turned around. Tanisha stood a few feet away, holding a paper cup with both hands like it was something fragile. She looked smaller somehow, not physically, but in presence. Her hair was pulled back into a messy bun, not the deliberate, styled kind, but the kind that happens when you give up halfway through getting ready. She was not wearing makeup, and there were faint shadows under her eyes. She looked tired, not just did not sleep well last night, tired, but the deeper exhaustion of someone living back under a roof they swore they would never return to. For a moment, we simply looked at each other. Tanisha, I said, my voice neutral, the same tone I might use greeting a vendor whose contract I had discontinued months ago. Can we talk? She asked quietly. Her eyes flicked around the crowded shop, taking in a line of people, the baristas moving behind the counter, the hum of conversation. Just for 5 minutes. Please. I glanced at my watch. I have to get to work, I said honestly. She stepped a little closer, lowering her voice further. Jason, please, she said, and her voice cracked on the last word. I just need to see you. I need to explain. I studied her face. I did not feel the rush of anger I had expected, nor the old warmth I used to confuse with love. I felt something closer to mild inconvenience and distant curiosity. You can walk with me to my building, I said. You have 3 minutes. She nodded quickly, as if afraid I would change my mind, and we stepped out onto the sidewalk. The morning air was cool and bright. People in suits and coats moved around us, heading to offices, tapping at phones, adjusting bags. We started walking. She struggled a little to match my pace, her steps quick and slightly uneven. I made a terrible mistake, Tanisha blurted out. I know I did. Victor was nothing. He was just a ghost from my past, and I got caught up in the moment. He stopped responding to me days after you left. It was foolish. I threw away everything for nothing. I kept my eyes forward. I know, I said simply. She swallowed. I miss you, Jason, she said. She reached out as if to touch my arm, and I shifted subtly to the side, avoiding the contact without breaking stride. Her hand fell awkwardly back to her side. I miss us, she continued, her voice gaining urgency. I miss our home. My parents' house is a nightmare. We argue all the time. I am sleeping in a twin bed. I miss talking to you. I miss my best friend. I stopped walking then. We were a block away from my office building, close enough that I could see the glass doors reflecting the morning light. She stopped too, turning to face me, hope flickering in her eyes, as if she believed this was the part where I would soften. You do not miss me, I said, my voice calm, almost gentle. You miss the apartment. You miss the safety. You miss having someone to absorb your anxiety so that you do not have to deal with it yourself. You miss the placeholder. She flinched as if I had struck her. That is not fair, Tanisha said, her eyes filling with tears. I loved you. I held her gaze. You told me to go sit alone at a restaurant while you flirted with another man on the night that was supposed to be about my career. I reminded her. You told me not to start anything, like my only role was to be quiet and convenient. That is not love. That is management. You were managing me, and I resigned. Tears spilled over now, running down her cheeks. This time, the crying did not sound like a performance. It sounded like the moment someone finally realizes that their usual tactics no longer produce the old results. Can we just start over? She asked, her voice breaking. Please, just coffee, just one drink, one conversation. Let me prove I can be better. Let us just start fresh. For a moment I was quiet, really looking at her one last time. I saw the regret, yes, but beneath it I still saw the same entitlement that had driven so many of her decisions. She believed, even now, that with the right combination of apologies and promises, she could negotiate my dignity back down to a level that would fit in her life again. I felt something loosen inside me, a final thread snapping. I smiled, but it was a small, contained smile that did not reach my eyes. "Start over," I repeated, as if testing the words. I leaned in slightly, not to be intimate, but to make sure she heard every syllable clearly. "Tanisha, you were the one who told me not to start anything," I said. "You wanted me to stay quiet, stay in my lane, and not make a scene, even when I was being openly disrespected. So I listened. I'm still listening." Her eyes searched mine, desperate. "Jason, I did not mean," she began, but I raised a hand slightly. "I'm not starting anything," I said firmly. "I am finished." I straightened, turned away from her, and walked toward the glass doors of my office building. I did not look back to see if she was watching me go. I did not check to see if she was crying harder or if she stood frozen in place. I walked into the lobby, nodded at the security guard, and swiped my badge at the turnstile. The familiar beep sounded quietly, accepting my presence without question. I stepped into the elevator, pressed the button for my floor, and, as the doors slid shut, cutting off the view of the street behind me, I let out a long, steady breath I had not realized I was holding. For the first time in a very long time, I was not sitting at a table waiting to be chosen. I had already chosen myself. I had finally found my table, and it was exactly where I wanted it to be. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.